What's up YouTube, and welcome back to Homebrew Subaru. In this episode I'm going to start on some wiring. So what's up everyone? Basically because I'm using a completely different engine in this car, I need to use a completely different ECU. And in order to get that ECU to work, I have to do a complete wiring harness in this car. And why I mean a complete harness is it's literally out of another car and it's cut in half. And when I said cut in half, like I literally meant it's cut in two. So this is the main engine harness from my old GF wagon, the Outback Sport Turbo that I built. And I pulled this out thinking I may need it to run this engine, and I'm glad that I did because here I'm at the point that I'm going to use it. So this was just basically cut at the firewall because to kind of get this thing routed through the firewall, you almost need to get half the dash pulled out, and I was just a little too lazy at the time. Figured I would waste my time later on reattaching the harness and making it less reliable. But I've done this type of work plenty of times in the past. It's kind of one of my specialties in my profession. So I do have the wiring diagram, but first thing I want to do is literally just kind of clean this up and get rid of what I don't need, because I believe the speed sensor and anything for the transmission, or actually these are O2. But yeah, I get some stuff to figure out. But yeah, just to kind of go through this, disconnect this ECU and start cutting off all this old insulation. Start trying to figure out what's going where from the ECU side. A bunch will be going to the engine, a bunch will be going to the car. And then just start stripping off the ends of the wire so I can reattach them. I'll get a section of harness out of the scrapped Legacy that I have in the back, I think, and plan to use it to reattach. But so I'll first start by trying to cut this old stuff off and clean it up a little bit, and I'll just sit outside while I do it. It's a nice day outside. You can really see how gorgeous it is out today. So I just brought my little work stool and sat it out here, did all the cleaning and wire stripping that I needed to do. Got some good burn on my arms going and my shoulders, but I'll head back inside now and show you where I've gotten to. So these are the sections of harness that I'll be using, all cleaned up. These being the engine side of the firewall, and these ones being the ECU side of the firewall. There's going to be a few more wires to strip out of these harnesses, but I've got all the leads all stripped and ready to go. Some of them may be adapted and have to be teed off into the WRX harness as well, so I have to consider that. On the engine side of things, these two are basically what plug into the actual harness on the engine, and then they'll attach to all of this stuff on the inside. And then this piece of harness here is just strictly for the O2 sensors. So I know I have a downstream sensor, but the upstream sensor I ended up reusing and putting a different connector on and putting in the Forester, and I have that video. I'll put the link down in the description. So that one just plugs into this one, and then these connections literally just go and connect back to the harness here as well. So there's a few things that I won't be needing, which is pretty much all the transmission stuff. From the backup light to the neutral switch and this vehicle speed sensor, because the harness for one goes onto the driver's side of the vehicle, which I'll show you in a second, and the other reason is I'm going to allow the WRX ECU to stay connected to the factory instrument cluster so that I can probably get a proper speed signal still. I've been really going over the wiring diagrams for both the car and the harness that I'm putting into the car. Now I can tell that the instrument clusters, although they're wired very similarly, the logics are certainly going to be different for the different ratio transmission. It seems to be all done in the cluster. There's a reference that goes to the ECU, and I'm sure it's so that it can kind of determine load and determine the mapping a little differently. I believe if I just leave all the WRX vehicle speed sensor with the ECU and that cluster, all of that should work. As for the tach, I've got a really good feeling that I should just be able to pick up off of the harness that I'm putting in the car from the crankshaft position sensor and literally tee that over into the WRX's harness, and as long as the ECU is powered up, it should reference and see RPM and send it to the cluster. I assume that it's going to work, but of course I'm going to have to test it. So over here on the car, first thing you'll notice is the harness for like the mass airflow sensor and the front O2 sensor for the WRX engine. I tried to get this harness to push through, but it's right up against the ducting for the ventilation. So there's no way I can get it to go through, and I don't feel like pulling the dash on this car either. And I want to retain this harness just in the, you know, the case that I ever want to go back to a dual overhead cam engine. Then it's as easy as plug and play. So the idea will be to pass through the wiring through the same area, and it's a lot of wiring to go through, so I might have to trim off quite a bit of that grommet to get it to pass through. Now, down the two main bulk connectors on the actual engine harness, usually had them pass through this way because they went up here to the firewall and then across. But the way that I'm seeing things routed, I decided to put them kind of down underneath the inlet of the turbo. That'll keep them a little further away from the exhaust. So I just got one of them plugged in, and just to give you an idea of how this will be laid out, something like this. And then I'll have the connections on this side of the firewall, I think. You can hear a seaplane going by. And then I'll go on the inside of the car and show you where I've decided to put the ECU. So underneath here, the passenger side of the dash, you can kind of see up there where I have the ECU, and I just have that one connector in place. I've taken the factory brackets off the actual ECU, and I can get little L brackets or whatever I need to kind of fasten it in place so it's not vibrating anywhere. And then when I look at the harness, I think because the ECU is so up close to the firewall, like the factory one's down on here on the floor and has kind of a little loop in the wiring, I think I might be able to get these all the wiring just to attach to the harness on the other side and not have to add any additional wiring. But I'll have to push through a connector and test that beforehand. But I think that's where that's going to go, and it'll be up out of the way, and I won't have to worry about it at all. So I know this was more or less just kind of an update video because I didn't do a lot of work or didn't show you guys a lot of work. But there's so much planning that goes into this, and it needs to be done absolutely 100% correct. You don't want to like get something mismatched at the ECU. You're just going to have the check engine light on and trying to diagnose it afterwards. Or, you know, the odd case of actually putting battery positive to somewhere it's not supposed to be and popping something in the ECU. So, you know, you don't want to play around with this stuff. It needs to be double checked and triple checked almost. And then because I need to kind of figure out more of the WRX harness just to make sure, or try and get some of those other things working in the instrument cluster. So there's a little bit of planning to that. And for those wondering about the up pipe, because it was kind of supposed to be the next video, is I ran into some design issues, and I've decided to go ahead and order a V-band flange and also a reducer from 2.5 inch to 2 inch. So I've got the V-band, but I don't have the reducer yet, and hopefully here for the next video. If not, I'll continue on with the wiring. So exhaust and wiring are kind of going together right now. But I'm getting closer and closer, you know, even though I've lost a little ambition, I want to keep on track and get this thing done. If you like this video, definitely give it a thumbs up. And if you're new here and you haven't already, please consider hitting that subscribe button for me. Leave your questions and comments further down below, and I'll see you in the next one.